Jesus walks into the temple in Jerusalem, his own church, and starts shouting at the money changers and vendors while knocking over tables and chairs. What would drive someone known as the Prince of Peace to such anger? For the answer, we're going to have to rewind history and look at what was happening to lead up to this incredible moment during Passion Week. A couple of thousand years before Jesus was born, Moses led the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. God gave the nation a whole set of rules and conduct called the law that was going to dictate their dress, their worship, their eating habits, their relationships, even their occupations. One tribe was given the daunting job of watching over the temple and handling the worship and sacrifices for the entire nation. Moses' own brother Aaron was the first high priest named in Scripture. Everything about his new role was dictated by God, right down to how he dressed. The temple wasn't just any old church either. This was where the literal presence of God lived on earth. If you didn't follow the exact rules when going into the innermost part of the temple, the Holy of Holies, it would mean certain death. Over the centuries, the Israelites had a volatile relationship with their Creator. They would obey for a generation, disobey for several, obey again for a period of time, only to disobey. Despite God's loving compassion toward them, they could never seem to truly turn their hearts as a nation and follow God once and for all. This was a group of people in serious need of reform, rehab, renewal. They needed triumph over their sin and a clear word from God that would propel them into the future. Back to Jesus' day. In the current political climate, the Hebrew people had completely abandoned God's law regarding the priests. The high priest was traditionally determined by drawing lots, but instead, the crooked Roman ruler ignored biblical law and appointed someone himself. You know, a guy who would do his bidding. The ruler would make sure he looked the other way as corruption ran rampant in the temple, and the priest would make sure the church didn't get in the way of the ruler's political agenda. From then on, the higher-ups bribed their way into the role of high priest. They'd gone full mob boss on God's house. Here's how it went down. It was required in the law to sacrifice an animal in order to make restitution for sins against God. Each person was supposed to bring an unblemished animal, have it approved by the priest, and then sacrifice it as an offering to the Lord. But the corrupt priests running the temple at the time rejected almost every animal brought in by the worshipers, and then insisted that they purchase the animals they had for sale in the temple courts, animals that happened to be marked up significantly. If you were coming from another country and needed to exchange money in order to purchase one of these marked up animals, well, they had money changers all set up to help you at an obscene inflation rate, of course. Are you starting to feel a little angry, a little frustrated at the injustice? Think of how God himself felt at such a mockery of his house. In this climate, Jesus enters. Right after John the Baptist baptizes him and he does his very first miracle, turning water into wine at a wedding, he goes straight to the temple in Jerusalem and chases out the money changers and merchants selling animals. He didn't do it on a whim either. He went in prepared with a whip to do some damage. He went in to make a statement. Considering he performed his first miracle at his mother's request, the disruption in the temple is the actual first thing Jesus does in his public ministry. Crazy, right? 3 years pass and we find ourselves in Passion Week. In 3 years of Jesus' ministry on earth, nothing had changed with the hoodlums running the temple. Jesus rides triumphantly on a donkey into Jerusalem as the people cheer, and then he heads toward church to give the mob bosses another piece of his mind. On the way into town, he passes a fig tree. It's in full bloom. He reaches up to grab some delicious fruit, the expectation that it will be there. There's no fruit. Despite its beautiful presentation, the tree was barren. Jesus cursed the tree for this and continued into the temple courts. This time when he goes in, he's quoting scripture from the books of Isaiah and Jeremiah as he drives out those running the corrupt marketplace inside his father's house. As he's knocking over tables and chairs, he tells them, "The scriptures declare my temple will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have turned it into a den of thieves." I'm sure you can imagine what happens when you try and go up against the mafia. You get a hit put out on you. Instead of searching their own hearts and actions, the priests immediately start plotting to kill Jesus. They were afraid of his power and authority. Having him around had become a real threat to their livelihood. Jesus leaves town immediately after this. On their way out of town, they pass the fig tree from the day before. Peter can't believe it. The fig tree's completely dead, all the way down to the roots. All show, no fruit. Jesus killed the tree. The temple, all show, no fruit. But Jesus didn't kill them. They were going to kill him. Jesus had a plan before he confronted them this time. He went in there to die.